Okay, hi everyone. Thank you for coming. Whether you are participating live here with us today or you're watching the recording, thank you so much for supporting the Quilt Alliance by your purchase of the Fabric Flower Mini Quilt project. And we have designer Allie Aller here with us today. I'm going to turn it over to Allie in just a second. This is a great project. It's adorable and you learn a lot of different skills in just a very small, fairly quick project. And there's also the second benefit of Allie has figured out how to make these into note cards, and she's going to show us some tricks about that. You can find Allie online through her Facebook account or Instagram or her wonderful blog, which really she uses as her website, and it's a great resource for past projects. You are a really good documentarian in your work. You show a lot of in progress and steps. That's why it's such a thrill to have you doing this project. Not only is your work gorgeous, and it is just a stunning use of materials, but also it teaches you so many things, just the way that you present it.
Well, thank you. Thank
Is
you.
wonderful. And I think if folks have questions, if you're watching this and you have any questions that Allie doesn't cover today, just send that email to me at information@quiltalliance.org and I'll send it to Allie, because I might have heard what the answer is first and I can step in, but if not, we'll ask Allie. And thank you, Allie, for doing this.
My
Allie
pleasure.
does everything 110%. She's not gonna, when she took this on, she really was super thorough. And the instruction booklet that comes with the kit is very thorough. This is just an extra because you're a great teacher, Allie, and also because we wanted folks to know, to maybe get a little, use this as a stepping stone, as I said, to other skills that they might want to use in other quilts. So you're going to expound on a couple things, but thank you to M&S Schmalberg, Shades Textiles, which is Stacy Michelle, and Misty Fuse, which is Iris Carp, excuse me, and Mountain Mist. They all donated small samples that you'll find in your kit. I'm going to go back one because we're not ready for that. I'm going to stop sharing.
Not that.
And Allie, I'm going to let's see, remove my spotlight so we can see you too.
Okay.
Yeah, and turn it over to you. I know you got a lot of great tips, and let me know if there's anything I can put in the chat box, any other links if I don't catch the ones that we had planned to put, and then any images you might want me to show.
Will do.
Okay.
All right. Well, I welcome you all to this Zoom. This is my first live Zoom event. So if I'm a little bit like jiggly, that's okay. This project has been such a joy for me to create for many reasons, but I would say the real driving reason is working with the flowers from M&S Schmalberg. This company is, I don't know if they're fourth or fifth generation by now, but they've been in the garment district in New York City, handcrafting flowers. So before I dive in, what I thought I would do on this Zoom is kind of go through the instructions that come with your kit. And I'm not going to go through every single thing, but there's some little pointers and tricks that I have when I'm working that will augment your instructions. But before I do that, I just want to say how this all started for me. Years ago, and I mean probably 25 years ago, I started cutting out letters and surrounding them with, a design. So this was an early one. And then this was for a woman getting married and moving to Texas. Except she got divorced and sent the quilt back to me. But I mean, you can, I asked my brother, which one should I do? What should I say? And he said this. But as you can see, I'm already combining flowers with type. And then the last one I want to show you is just if you want to take this idea and really run with it, I made my font bigger and I ended up using it as the center for an embellished piece.
Oh, gorgeous.
So that was I've had this in my body of work for a long time. So this project came very naturally to me, especially using these wonderful flowers. So let's start with tip one. And that has to do with when you unpack your flowers from your kit. I haven't seen the kit the way it's been packaged, but I do know from when I get flowers from them that they can really stick together. What they do is they layer up to 50 sheets of prepared fabric, and then they put it in their hydraulic press and they die cut it. And that way they're cutting out 50 at a time, but they can stick together. So I want to encourage you when you open your flowers, double check each one. Even on my sample, I missed one and I've got a double flower that I sewed on. So double check to make sure your flowers are separated. That way you won't waste one and you'll have enough. And so that's important. I mean, they come this small even, and these will stick together. So be sure you do that. Okay, now we're going to go straight on to the background. In your instructions, there's a part that says, put down your template and play with your flowers, arranging them in different ways. And I don't think we need to cover that because that's your job. But moving right on to the next job you have is preparing your background for the flowers. So what I like to do to find the center of this wonderful fabric that Stacy sent to all of us is it's very simple. I fold it in half, and then I fold it in a quarter, and then I just iron right the tip. I don't iron the whole seam because that might be a little hard to get out. So I just iron the center. And so when I open it up, I have my center marked. And then the next part is to center the oval from your template pattern sheet. You've got an oval that has the center marked in it. And the easiest way to get your oval shape on your background fabric is to just put your pin through that, through the center, and then put your pin in the center of your crease there and line it up. And then I just draw around it with a disappearing pen. Simple. Now, if you don't want to do it that way, you can use a light box, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But the simplest way is what I'm showing you here. Just cut out your template and draw around the shape. So that's that. And then to get your letters straight, I take a pen. It says in the instructions, and I draw a horizontal line using a ruler, and that's going to be my guideline for when I fuse my letters down on my background. Simple. One other tip is I think in your kit you have one sheet of your template, and I would encourage you to make a copy and have a couple other sheets because you're going to be cutting them up maybe, and it's nice to have the full sheet for reference.
Good idea.
Yeah. So, okay, there's that. So the background's pretty simple. The lettering is more involved. The lettering is kind of the heart and soul of this project in terms of techniques, and I have quite a bit to say about it. The first thing I want to say is whatever lettering fabric you use, get that Misty Fuse fused on the back before you do anything else, because there's been a few times I've cut out my letters, and realized that I hadn't prepared my fabric. And so you really want that fusible on there before you start. So make a note of that. Fuse first. Now this Misty Fuse that Iris was so generous to give us looks like this. It is not paper backed. And she has reasons for that that are very interesting, but you can't just fuse it on with your iron because it's glue. So you need some kind of silicone sheet or Teflon sheet between the Misty Fuse, the fabric, you put the Misty Fuse here, and then you put your fabric on and you iron it. But you really need to have some kind of release paper, or she calls them goddess sheets. I think Amy's going to have a link to where you can purchase this.
Yeah.
It's not on the supply list. I'm sorry about that, but you really need to make sure that you protect your iron and your surface by using this release paper, or the goddess sheet, or the release paper. So you've got your fabric, you've got it prepared. So there's really 3 different ways that you can get the pattern of the letters onto your fabric. The first one is a light box, and that's where Amy has a picture where you can actually, if you don't have a light box, you can use the screen of a laptop. That video that is linked there gives you some pointers, because obviously you don't want to like jam hard pressure on your laptop screen. So that looks like a good link if you don't have a light box. But I have a couple different light boxes. Thanks, Amy. Yeah. See how thin it is? It weighs nothing, and it's I think it was $15. And it's a very handy tool to have. I made my friend Meg Cox get one. She didn't have one. It's like, what? Go get a light box. It's really handy. So I just turn it on. I think tattoo artists use them a lot. And you put down your writing, and then you put your fabric over it, and you just trace it. It's very simple. Now I use a couple different pens. There's this water soluble blue pen that we all are familiar with. And then this is a little more controversial in the quilt world. It's a Flexion pen that irons off. And some people don't like them because they think the ink comes back on, especially in cold weather. I don't know. I love them. You get a really fine line, a fine, thick line, and it irons right off. So when I'm tracing, this Flexion pen is the one I like. I buy them in bulk on Amazon. You know, I just go through them. I love having them. So once you get it traced, can you see? It looks like that.
Yeah.
And then you cut it out. I will say at this point, the reason I like to choose fonts that are connected, like cursive, is that lining up these individually cut letters on a horizontal line and then ironing them, it can be tricky. I mean, yeah, you can do it accurately, and I have done it accurately, but this is way simpler. So that's why I like having them all connected, because then you just line it up on the line that you've drawn on your background and you're pretty straight.
That makes a lot of sense. Do you know what typeface that is?
Yeah, it's called Jelly Roll. And it was one I had to download as a free download. I think I just typed in cursive font, did a search. So the light box is definitely the simplest way to go. Okay, another way you can go is to actually take your writing, your paper, and I use a very, very light spritz of this repositionable adhesive. And I just barely fix it on there. And then I use my scissors to cut through both the paper and the fabric. This happens to be ultra suede. And that is a really good candidate for this technique, because it would be very hard to trace you know, through ultra suede on the light box. And I also like ultra suede, just as an aside, because it's very rich looking and it obviously doesn't fray. So it's a really nice,
Ooh.
yeah, it's really, and it's, you know, it's easy to cut. So I just cut out my letters like that. And then at the end, let's see if I can get through this T. At the end, you peel off the paper and you've got, you know, you've already got the adhesive on the back, then it's just ready to fuse. So this is, I did it this way for years. And the only hard part can be, say you've used this technique on something like velvet, the adhesive will actually pull out some of the fibers. So
Yeah.
you have to have a really light touch, and you have to use it on the right fabric. So I'm a big fan of ultra suede. Okay, so
Allie, are those fabric scissors or paper scissors, or ones you use for both?
I have some that I use for both. That's a good question. I mean, this might be a good time to talk about scissors. I usually have 3 or 4 pairs of these going at once, some for fabric, some for paper, some for both. If I'm just cutting fabric very detailed, like if I'm cutting out my traced, I love these Karen K. Buckley little scissors because they're serrated all the way out to the point, and you can get super detailed with them. I wish, to be frank, I wish they stayed sharp longer. I mean, I use them all the time, and I usually have to get a new pair about once a year.
Mm.
But these are awesome.
Mm.
And then these little Fiskars are much cheaper, and they're you use them this way. And so if you have any kind of hand issue, this is easier on the hand. And again, these are inexpensive, and I go through them. But I really recommend either pair. So anyway, here's my tea, and I'm just gonna peel off my paper. And there you have it, my little tea. So,
Nice.
you know, you can get pretty detailed. You have to like make yourself slow down and pay attention, or, you know. There's another method for transferring that's new to me, and I've just tried it out for this project. And it's this stuff that C&T Publishing makes. It's white carbon paper, white transfer paper. And it's meant, I think they market it for marking sashiko patterns. But what I like about it is that you can get a nice line on darker fabric.
Ah.
I chose it on this red, and you put the paper over the fabric. I'm sorry, you put your writing over the paper, carbon paper writing. And then you use a burnishing tool, which I don't have, like a little teeny point or a little teeny ball on a handle. I think that's the actual best way to use it. But I used the blunt end of a needle to push down, and it acted as my burnisher. I had it here and it just went flying. Anyway, so this is another option. I'm still playing with it, but I like it. So it gives you a very faint line. And then I just go over my white line with my dark iron pen. This white stuff, I believe, irons off also. So if you like the carbon paper option, that's what this is. And then I just go over it with my darker iron off ink, and then I'll cut it out from there.
Great.
Oh, you can't.
It's hard to see it, but
I'm sorry. I can take a picture after.
Yeah, we'll add it to the slides.
Yeah.
Take a photo.
Okay, so those are 3 different ways. Also, there is a wonderful quilter out there named Shannon Brinkley, who has a lot of information on her website. A lot of it's free. She's quite an entrepreneur and creative spirit. I'm just getting to know her work, and I really admire her drive and her generosity. Anyway, she has given us permission to link, which Amy will add the link to the chat box, to link to an article on her website that talks a lot more about letter transfers, different methods that I haven't covered. She's got 2 different fonts on there for you to work with. And I highly recommend you check it out if you want to pursue more of this kind of work. So thank you, Shannon.
Yeah.
Another resource that I want to share with you is if you have your letters and actually you want to try a bigger project, but how do you get your words to fit the project that you have in mind? There's a site called Rapid Resizer. Again, Amy will add that. Some people could do all that in Photoshop. I flunked Photoshop 3 different times. It's just not the way my mind works, but Rapid Resizer is super easy. You just upload your image, and then you type in the dimensions you want, and bang, they make a PDF that you can print out, and there's your pattern. I mean, I stopped going to Kinko's years ago when Rapid Resizer became available, and it's just this guy up in Ontario, Canada somewhere. It's his life's business. He runs the whole thing. He wrote it, he runs it, and it costs, I think, $12 a quarter. And I just love the idea of supporting a guy like that, providing this great service for all of us. So Rapid Resizer, if you want to change the size of your font,
Fantastic.
give it a look. There's one more thing about the lettering that I want to show you, and that's here's our sample as we have put it out. But my first try at it actually looked like this. This is diving into my own stash of flowers, and this says thank you. And you notice this says thanks. These letters are much smaller, and they're a pain. They're sort of a pain to cut out when they're that detailed. But a trick for working with letters that are this small is I cut them out, and I'm not going to sew them down the way these are sewn down. And this is in your instructions. I use a fine needle and a clear thread, and I zigzag them in place. But these, I just knew I would munch my letters with my sewing machine because they are so fine. So all I did was fuse them on, and then I outlined my letters in permanent fabric ink, you know. So I just outlined them, and then I quilted around the ink. So you can see it. It looks pretty finished, but it was no sew. So if you're going to use something super detailed, it's a way to get around the technical risks, I guess.
Smart.
Well, you know, I
It
think
really does look dimensional. The
yeah,
quilting
I think design work is mostly problem solving, to be honest. So anyway, I think that's pretty much it for lettering. When you another point I just want to talk about is the flower centers. That's kind of the next section. After you've got your letters on and you've arranged your leaves and your flowers, you've sewn your leaves on, again, that's all in the instructions. You've got your flowers, and how are you going to hold them in place? Well, that's a great big design opportunity for you to make this project your own. So there's different ways you can do it. On this sample here, I show you've got a button in the center, you've got a flat bead, you've got French knots, You've got just stitching. And this here, I just sewed down with clear thread if you don't want to center at all. But this is a fun way to play. You might find that you're going to start adding beads and buttons all over the place. I encourage you to do that. Make this your own. But as a design element, I don't know if you can see, but on the outer ring of purple flowers, I've chosen orange beads. And the reason I did that is to pick up the orange in the lettering and kind of pull that orange out and make a little bit more of a cohesive design. And so my point in mentioning that is you can really push on your composition with every choice you make. And in this case, it was, how to get that orange balanced out in the rest of my little composition. So always be thinking of the whole when you pick something, unless, of course, if it's a very sentimental object and you have special buttons that you want to use or something that means a lot to you, then that's a different decision. But in terms of what you choose to put in the center, think about it, try different things and see what looks best. You might surprise yourself. Okay, so we are on to finishing already. There are two ways. This first sample I used just a regular binding, and I don't even talk about the binding on the instructions because we're quilters and we know how to bind generally, or we know where to look for information. So I didn't talk about that, but I will say that because this is a thin binding, I cut my strips 1 3/4 to make my binding. I don't think I put that anywhere, and then folded it in half, and it's a double fold binding. And I ended up sewing it on by machine in the front and then sewing it down by hand on the back. So that's the binding. The envelope method is much quicker. And if you don't necessarily want that outer line of color, one other thing is you will notice I used the same fabric in my binding as I did for my lettering. Again, that was a composition choice. But if you don't want that, the envelope method is really simple. Again, I talk about it in the instructions. Basically, you put things right side together with the batting, and then you sew around the perimeter and you leave it open at the bottom, and then you turn it inside out, and then you whip stitch the bottom closed. The one thing I want to make sure you know about when you're doing the envelope method is it's a very fine seam that you're sewing along the edge. It's like 1/8 of an inch. So it's okay to trim up your top and your binding, but your backing fabric, see how I've left it a little bit bigger?
Yeah.
When I've sewn on my sewing line. That's because it's just much more easy. It's much easier to be accurate when you've got that extra and you sew it and then come back and trim it, and you've got your hopefully perfect little seam, but you're not having to line up these 3 layers and then sew accurately along that edge. That's too hard for me. There's probably lots of people who can do that, but I can't do that. Yeah. So this is my little tip for that. And the corners, again, when I sew, I angle at the corner just a little bit before I sew this way. And then when I trim it, I go like that, so that when you turn it inside out, you don't have this extra blobby fabric in your corner. So this is just experience talking. I've learned the hard way, and this works really well for me.
That's so applicable to so many projects.
Oh yeah.
That edge trick.
Yeah.
Not getting until you're done. Yeah.
No, that's really good. Now, we know that it's not finished until it's labeled, right? We know this. And so just to show you what I did, very simple. I have just a piece of fabric with, fusible on the back, and I wrote out, actually I made my lines with my disappearing ink so that I could write in a straight line. And then I put on my information. And then when I ironed it on, my lines went away and I've got my label. It's very bare bones, but it tells the story.
Yep.
And Quilters Take a Moment is going to have a whole presentation on documenting quilts. And included in that will be some really nice label ideas. So I am looking forward. I think it's Michelle Muska and Leslie Jennison, if I'm not
Yes, it
mistaken.
is.
And they are the dynamic duo for this kind of stuff. So
They
that's going to
are.
be really, really great to see. So don't forget your labels. So the last thing I want to talk about is the cards and how can you turn this into a thank you card? Well, it's pretty easy. What I do is, and Amy's got the I just put it in Word. Amy's got a slide of that. Again, those of you in, oh, I didn't talk about quilting. Well,
We
we'll
can
come
go
back to
back.
that.
We'll go
Okay.
back.
So I just lay it out in a Word document like this. I'm, as I said, I'm not a Photoshop user. I'm not a graphic artist, but this works for me. And I send the JPEG to my pals at my local print shop who know me very well, and they print it up on cardstock. They use a laser printer, so I get really sharp, saturated color. My home printer won't do that for me. And um, it costs $1 of a piece for the fancy cardstock and the printing, and I think that's a good price for a homemade thank you card. I will say that when I was first working with this project, I had it printed up in both matte and glossy. Glossy's on this one, and I find that I really prefer the matte for a couple reasons. One, I think it looks better, and two, if you're actually going to write on the inside, it's much easier to write on the matte than it is on the glossy. So that would be my suggestion: is go with the matte. So I have it printed up, and then I have a really good trick that they taught me for how to get this perfect fold. Because if you take cardstock and you just fold it in half and try and crease it, you're not going to get a nice fold. And maybe there's paper workers among you, or scrapbook people. I didn't know this. It's very simple. You just score it. So you take an X-Acto knife and you take your ruler. And I guess the way this paper is made is maybe it's in a couple layers. I'm not sure, but you just score the top layer of paper very, very gently. Let's see if you can see this. There we go.
Yeah, that's better.
So I've lined it up, and I just very lightly go along the edge. And then when it comes time to fold it, it's perfect. Piece of cake. That might be worth the price of admission right there.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you can go back and you can trim off however much margin. I kind of like it clean like this.
Yeah.
And let's see, for an envelope for something this big, I just got half size. They're 6x9. And I checked with the post office, and this is regular first class mail as long as it's not over an ounce. So you can just use a regular stamp. And then finally, if you want to make it smaller yet, you can do small ones. Oops. Where's my little gift tag? I'm sorry. You can either make a really teeny card, or you can cut it out and use your dullest rotary cutter. I have one that's just for paper.
Good tip.
Yeah. And just trim it down, and you've got this cute little gift card, or if you're putting it in a gift basket, or I mean, there's lots of ways to say thanks, right? Lots of occasions. But I think this is really, really cute.
It's such a nice tactile, unique effect with paper, a print on paper that's actually from the image of fabric.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I've tried scanning little quilt projects, but I think a good photograph works better because the scanner has trouble, especially if
Yeah.
it's 3D, has trouble
Yeah.
focusing. But it's definitely unique, and if you do this, it will be straight from you to whoever you're thanking, and it's a really nice touch, I think.
So cool, Allie.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, I went through a period where I put lettering on a background, like one of them said hi and one of them said miss you, and then I would actually take fresh flowers and arrange them on top of my fabric,
Ah.
writing. I'd arrange the flowers and then photograph it and then turn that into a card. Super fun.
So the quilts with the letters or with the words were just blanks, and you it was sort of just stand-ins, and you would dress them up with different flowers and take
Yeah.
photos.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fantastic. What a great idea.
Yeah, that's really fun. And then I mean, you can say whatever you want.
Yeah, you could have a range of
There
greetings.
was there was one a friend of mine was going through a hard time, and you know how in the comics when somebody's swearing, it's all these different symbols, like all the different symbols in a line, they're swearing. So I did that in really pretty letters, and put my fresh flowers around it and sent it to her, and she's like, "This is my logo." It was
That
great.
is exactly where my mind was going.
Yep.
A
Yep.
couple in there that are double messages.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. So you can take this basic concept, this card concept, and really run with it in lots of different ways. It's fun.
Very cool.
And I think, ladies and gentlemen, I think that's all I have, unless you have any questions.
Do you want to show those to that slide of the quilting?
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you. I did not. I skipped over this,
Let me go
but
back here.
yeah, we put the slides in because it's hard to see it from with the camera here. You see on the left, this one, I stipple quilted it completely flat. And then the center, I didn't. So it makes the center puff up a little more than the background. And I kind of liked that idea.
Yeah.
This one, if you don't want to spend a lot of time quilting, and you can see that I'm really not hung up on having perfect corners. You know, it's still good, but um, it could be a little better. Anyway, just outline around the inside of the oval, the outside, and around the little flowers on the edge. And then after it was turned and sewn, I just did one line of stitching a quarter of an inch in from the perimeter just to kind of cinch it and secure it. So this was extremely fast. So if you want to just knock this out without investing a whole lot of time, you can just buzz right through it. So
Allie, is that orange center fabric for the type, is that ultra suede in your sample?
it is not. This is actually an ombre fabric. See how it's a little darker at the
Yeah.
S than it is at the T?
Mhm.
I always like to have some kind of movement. I don't use solids unless I have to because I like a little movement. But no, it's not. This is just regular quilter's cotton that's been fused and then sewn with a very, very fine needle because you want a small hole, and then clear thread zigzag.
Great.
And I think it was not free motion zigzag. It could be, but I think I just kept turning it, as
Mhm.
I was going around. But piece of cake.
Fantastic.
Okay.
And if someone doesn't have a machine that can do zigzag, they could just do the, do a
And
straight through your hand zigzag, hand
yeah,
sew it
you,
on.
yeah, you sure could. You
Yeah.
sure could. But if they didn't have a zigzag for a project like this that's kind of small and quick, I would just fuse it and outline it in ink.
Yeah. That,
Maybe do a little bit of practice, like practice fuse on a curve or something on a background, and then practice inking around it before you go straight to your project, just to make sure you've got your hand motions right, because the ink is permanent, and if you mess up, you'll be sad. You'll
yeah.
have to figure out a way to fix it. So practice first. That's
Practice
always
is
a good
perfect.
idea. Yeah.
Well, Allie, unless you have something else to add, I think we're at the end of our tips and tricks session, but I want to thank you. And I want to say that we're going to get a photo of that quilt behind you
Oh,
and add it to the slides because that is, I know folks are going to ask. It's stunning.
thank you. The reason, one of the reasons I chose this quilt is that in the border that you can't see very well from here, I've got more M&S flowers um, incorporated into this design. I mean, they show up in just about everything I make. The other just interesting side note about this is this fabric here, which you'll see in close up. Via Instagram, I became friends with a woman who heads up a weaving studio in Moscow, Russia.
Wow.
And they use looms and techniques and patterns and silk, everything historical from the 1600s, the 1700s, the 1800s. And most of their business is with the state when they are restoring fine homes or castles, and they need to recreate the fabrics that were used in those opulent days. And so they they weave this amazing stuff. And I finally said, I have to work with it. Can I buy some? And they said, of course. So we sell it by the meter. And so that meter of silk took them 2 weeks to weave.
Wow.
And it wasn't cheap, but my rationale was, and I've always got a rationale, that I'm going to be working on this quilt for anyway 6 months. And every time I look down at my work table and I see that fabric, it just fills me with happiness.
Oh,
So
yeah. Good enough reason.
yeah, I mean it's spectacular textile, and I feel very honored to even be able to work with it. So I will make sure there's a couple pictures of it.
Yes. Great.
Um, and I will also send you their Instagram account handle so that you can follow them on Instagram. They do amazing
Yeah, I would love to.
work.
And did anybody have a question who's on live here today for Allie?
No,
If
we're
anyone
good.
has questions, as I said before, just send them to me at information@quiltalliance.org. We'll make sure that Allie gets them. And I've also got this slideshow. I'm going to post it with the video, with the recording of this session so that you can get those links directly from the slideshow or from the chat, which will be saved. And we have an interview with Allie, QSOS interview, brand new interview with Allie done by our friend Michelle Muska, which is a fantastic interview. It'll be released to our members this weekend, and we will probably put that on the page with this recording so everyone who
Okay.
buys the kit can see it as an extra treat because it's a fantastic interview, and it really is nice to have a snapshot of your work right now during this time in our lives. And so we're going to be able to share that too, Allie. Thank you so much. Thanks everybody for being on with us live, and thank you
Thank
for
you.
everybody else who's going to see this later. Um, thanks, Sally.
Great. My pleasure. It's been my pleasure. Take care, everybody.
Okay, you too. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.